Of course, when it comes to natural materials for footwear, we see way more animal materials than plant materials. Yet, interestingly enough, apparently now when we think of using animals for consumption, we think either of the skin or of meat, even though our primeval ancestors used all parts of the animal, which is why they didn't have a waste problem, and which is also the reason why we now find designers rediscovering other parts of the animal besides just skin or meat. We found that most people have no objections to using other parts of the animal as long as they don't recognize them. For instance, when people see these shoes, they say, "Oh, how beautiful, it's fish leather." But it's actually not fish at all, it is cow stomach, which has a similar scaled texture. Unfortunately though, designer Peter Schmidt, who designed these shoes a couple of years ago, informed us that this material is actually really fragile. So hopefully they are working on new ways of tanning stomach, because obviously once it is in the animal, it's not fragile at all. A more common animal material for footwear is horn, which can be used for heels, of course, as you can see here. What most people don't realize is that most of the bone that is left after slaughtering an animal is not used for anything and is just disposed of. UK designer Andrew Ross researched this issue for his bone project, and he found out that about 3 million tons of bones are incinerated every year, and that is in Europe alone, even though the majority of this bone was classified as fit for human consumption. This inspired him to research what all this bone might be used for, and he created a couple of prototypes using bone, some virtual and some real, as you can see here. And he showed them to various consumer focus groups, and basically the results were, like we said before, that people really have no objection whatsoever to the use of bone as long as they don't recognize it. There's one exception though, and that's the type of consumer that is very trendy and high fashion. This type of consumer actually appreciates recognizing the bone, so it depends on who you are targeting with your product. Since designers usually belong to a trendy audience themselves, it's no surprise that we see other designers using bone as well, like the bone brooches from Hanne Jonsdottir, or Something Fishy by Rochilde Jonsdottir, also from Iceland, who is remaking an old Icelandic game using fish bone to have children make little figurines. Bone could be very suitable for making footwear accessories, but since we didn't find any, we created our own using good old Photoshop and taking into account the research results by Andrew Ross. So say you want to make this bootie for a mainstream audience, you could make the button out of bone and then dye it so it's not recognizable as bone. Or in this case, since it's a rather primitive looking shoe, you could even use it undyed, showing just the texture. Or if you were to make that same bootie for a trendy audience, you would indeed take a button that actually shows the bone. Yet on the other hand, there's a growing number of consumers that strongly object to the use of any animal material. Now before, this was mostly for reasons of animal cruelty, but now there's another reason added to that, because keeping livestock greatly attributes to deforestation and global warming. So we find designers coming up with new ideas to mimic animal materials, for instance to mimic animal fur. Now as such this is not new, although most alternatives are made of synthetic material, which doesn't always help either when it comes to sustainability. Yet there's one more experimental project that we would like to show you. It's called Wardrobe of Nature, and it's done by Finnish artist Annie Rapinoja. And she actually used furry plants to create her fur coats, or her fur shoes, as you can see here. And most people just don't realize how many furry plants you actually have, like this willow. Of course, for now, it's still too labor intensive and too difficult to turn this into a commercial material, yet hopefully with some research, we could do so in the long run, or maybe just start off with a hairy flock print made of plants.